So yeah, this is the Jefferson County Aries group that I did a presentation on in Anderson Powerpoles. If you're not familiar with the Anderson Powerpoles, this is the standard that N0XRX Aries has standardized on for power for radios. The idea behind it is that if you are deployed out someplace that there isn't a everything is standardized. You don't have to figure out how to connect your radio up to a power supply. Uh, everything just works together. So part of the Aries requirements in their book is to know how and demonstrate the ability to install Anderson power poles. So I did the presentation, and then we did a bunch of installs and had people try it out, that kind of thing. And maybe someday we'll do it for DRC as well. So let's get into this, I think. Let's see if I can move this forward. Hello. There we go. When I first started with the Aries, this is the actual Aries documentation about how to do it, and you guys aren't going to care about any of this. So Anderson power poles, this is the breakdown of what they look like. It's a piece of housing, a plastic housing with a either aluminum or steel insert on the inside that makes the actual contact. There is definitely a right and a left, and there is a standard for which one is on the left and which one is on the right. They can be put together in any configuration. So this is probably the biggest thing that I see when people new going installing this. They just connect it together however the cable is put together, the zip wire, and it's the wrong orientation. So looking at the direction going out away from them, power is always on the right, as though you're looking down on top of it, and looking away is where you're going to plug it in. The thing you're going to plug it into, it's on power. Red is on the right. Red is on right. Plugging it in. Red on right. Said it enough times, maybe you'll remember it now. I don't know. In this particular drawing, there is a roll pin that you can install in between the two that allows, it ensures that they don't come apart. I have had, I used to install roll pins all the time, and they actually make a little tool that you can install it, and with my fat fingers, it's hard to install that roll pin, and I used to put it in because I am anal retentive. And I actually was deployed out on a site where they had the power wrong. They didn't have red on the right, and I couldn't plug into their power, and they couldn't disconnect their configuration. So I had to punch the roll pin out of mine and switch it to connect it into their power. So I stopped putting the roll pin in. It's just me because of my experience, but I don't know that everyone would experience that type of thing, so you might as well put it in. If you get the tool, it makes it really easy to install and to remove. When we look at the actual connection element, the connector, this is what it looks like. And the most important thing to understand about this drawing is that width is like super critical. And I'm going to try to show you that here a little bit. And I have another little camera over here that we're going to try to do this. I don't know how it's going to work. We'll see. But the idea is that sometimes when you crimp down on these, even with the Anderson Powerpole crimper, it flattens out and it gets too wide. So, and we'll see in a couple more slides, getting this slid into that plastic housing, it is a tight tolerance to get it in there. And it's a fight. So I always tell people, if you're going to do this, make sure that even if you squat and flatten it out, make sure you kind of round that thing back up and get it in line with the tongue of the Anderson Powerpole, because that's the actual width. All right, Powerpole, a side view, a cutaway view on it. This is how it actually fits in to the connector and the housing. If you can look rather close, you can see that there is like a spring-loaded tab on the very top, and that's what actually holds everything in. and you have to get that tongue that points up underneath that tab, and that locks it in. And that also allows you that you can stick something in there and hold that tab up and pull it back out if you do something wrong. So gives you an idea of what the connector actually looks like. This is kind of hard to see, but when you talk about the connector, there's two parts of the part that you see on the end, and I'll show it to you in a minute. But that top small part where the hook goes up, they call that the tongue. And it's obvious is when you see. So the rule of thumb is the tongue up, spring up. So when you're orienting to put them in, have your tongue on the upside and have the spring pointing up, and it'll slide in every time. It took me a while to figure that out, and it was always a 50-50 shot of whether I got it right or wrong. So alignment, orientation, orientation and alignment. Obviously, your brown goes to the black, positive, red goes to red. If you notice the orientation, the hook is going down and the tongue is on the bottom, and that's why you can't really see this. You'll see this in the next slide. I've also found it's a lot easier to put both of them in at the same time. It doesn't always work out that well, but most of the time, that's the easiest way to get them installed. Uh-oh, wait a second. Correct, wrong. So on this one, you can see that the hook is going up on them, not to mention that the black wire is going to the red one and the red one is going to the black one. This is the other thing that's kind of important, is that when you're manipulating them and you're crimping them, they they get kind of twisted around. And if they're in the wrong orientation when you crimp them on there, you can just twist them to get them to the right orientation, but you have to make sure that they're parallel with each other, they're flat. Having them trying to sticking them in like this is very difficult because the tolerance is so tight when sliding it into the housing. So here's where we talk about the hook and the tongue. So see if I can point it out here with my little tiny mouse. So this little piece on top here, the red one's probably easier to see, is that little piece is the tongue. And that's what helps orient them going into the different pieces of equipment that you're going to be plugging them into, or into each other. So you can see the hook goes up with the tongue up. Hook up, tongue up. That's how I keep remembering how to do this. The other thing is that there is a very distinct click when you get them all the way in it, and it's connected. So you may have it in, and even if you think you hear a click, just give it a little tug on that when you pull out on it. And if it's not seated correctly, or it doesn't get it up underneath that spring correctly, it'll just come right out. So make sure it's in there, you hear the click, and you pull on it. The other thing that happens sometimes with the, especially if you're not using the standard or the Anderson Powerpole crimping tool, which you don't have to use, you can just crimp it with anything, or some people solder them. So sometimes when you're manipulating them, this is really pieces of aluminum. They're very small, thin. They tend to get bent if you manipulate them too much. So always keep that in mind, that it does need to be flat and not bent in any one of these, or disformed in any one of these types of connections. So Anderson Powerpole end to end, if you were going to connect two pieces of wire together, these are the components that you would need. I didn't talk about the housings. I don't put housings on everything. If I have them, I do. I usually forget about it. And you can't put them on after you crimp, so you have to remember to get them on before you start crimping. So they make it nice and clean, and it does make it rather easy to plug them into each other. So if you have them, use them. If you don't, that's fine too. You don't have to have them. So we have contacts, we have housings, and the opposite side, same thing: housing, contacts, and There you go. That's Powerpole end to end. Okay, stripping back the different types of wire that you're going to use. Anderson says to use a 5/16 inch strip, and I don't know about you, but I'm not young enough to see 5/16 when I'm stripping. There are some tools, and I'll show you some of the tools as we get going through here, and where you can actually set the 5/16. If you get it close, that's fine. The bigger thing on the bottom picture is you want to get the connector part of it as close to the sheathing as you can get. But I always recommend to give it a little bit of gap in there, because it's worse to actually crimp that insulation underneath the actual aluminum piece. That's because that over time that'll loosen up, and that end will just come off. So if you can see a gap in there, that's what I do to make sure that I know that I'm not crimping on top of the insulation. So here's the cutaway of how the contact is made when you click these together. You can see the contact is with the hooks going the opposite direction, the tongues are in opposite directions, and then the spring is what pushes it both together, so it makes sure that it has a good contact. You can remove them. They do make a special removal tool, and I probably have it around here somewhere. I have not been successful in using the removal tool. I paid the extra money for it. I can't seem to get it to work. My best success has been with like a jeweler's flat screwdriver, and it's basically the same idea, except with a little tiny thin flat screwdriver, you can just slide that in there, and since you know how it is built and how that spring needs to be pushed down for it to slide out, you just need to get that screwdriver in there far enough to move that spring down, and you just pull it out. That works best for me, and you don't have to have a special tool for it. This talks about the removal again, and it's talking about something you need to slide in there to drop that spring down to allow that hook to get past that little spring metal, so you can pull it straight out. It's really not that bad to remove it. Typically, the only time I've ever had to remove it is when I've done something wrong, or I've crimped the insulation, or something is not making contact correctly, or I deformed it in some way, and I got to pull it out, cut it off, and make a new one. All right, wire gauges and types of connectors, and for the most part, Anderson makes every kind you can imagine, from the smallest to the huge, massive. But for us, these are the three that we as amateur radio operators will ever use, for the most part. I'm not going to say ever. I guess I shouldn't say ever. And actually, if you wanted to buy a kit, if you buy the 30 amp ones, you're going to be fine. Even with the 30 amps, you can get the smaller gauge wire in it by folding them over, or getting them built up a little bit and then crimping them down. The 15 amps are good for some of the ancillary types things. So if you're running a small fan, I have a couple of them for like laptops, or for my TNC node. It has really small. It's smaller than even 20 gauge. It's like 30. So the 15 amps work better for that, mainly because they're smaller. And I have a few here that I'll show you. When I started doing my own, I just did 30s, because I didn't know which ones to get, so I just did the 30s. The 45s come in handy when you're doing things with maybe some of the batteries, some of the larger batteries, or you're going to maybe you want to have a little extra capacity for an HF rig or an amplifier or something like that. You can definitely tell the difference between a 45 amp and a 30 amp. They're obvious. The 15 and 30, with my eyes, I have to really look hard to see it, and I'll show you that here in a minute as well. Talking about wire gauge, we all should probably know this, but if you If we are wanting a 30 amp circuit to run from a battery to your radio, I found this out the hard way when I have batteries on this side of my trailer, and I had to run up and over the top and down this side and all the way to the front of the trailer to an HF radio, and I'm pumping out as much as I can, but I'm only getting 50 watts out of this thing, and I don't even have enough to hit the amp to fire the amp off. And I realized I was running way too small a cable. As you know, we have a significant voltage drop over distance depending on the size of the cable. So if we're going to be, let me see if I can point it here. So if we're looking at 30 amps, and up here at the top is our distance in feet. So the size of cable that you're going to need, let's say to go 15 feet, is you're going to need a number 8 gauge cable. Now, if we go back, 8 will not fit in a 45 amp connector. Actually, it will. You can trim off some of the strands and you can get it in there. You're not supposed to do that, but you can get it in there. But so you're going to be somewhat limited by the length of cable you should be running. So if you're running 30 amps, you should have no more than a 10-foot cable. But that's, for most of us, that's going to be just fine. You're not going to run more than 10 foot on your cable. So just keep that in mind. The wire size does matter when it comes to this stuff. Some of the accessories, there are a ton of accessories for Anderson power poles. Different kinds of distribution blocks. I have a couple here I'm going to show you as well, but I have this very one. The one that's on the left on this picture, I have that spread out across my trailer for all the different power distribution points. They're really nice because they're fused and they're Anderson, so they're ready to go. You just have some short jumpers, all you have to run to them. But you can run a number 8 or a number 6 to those, and you have plenty of power going to them, and then it distributes across that as a diminishing power load, obviously. With the one on the right, it's everything gets everything, so you have to just be careful. You're not going to overload them, those kind of things. But if you go online, you can get this stuff anywhere. Amazon, I buy a lot from Amazon. PowerWorks and Rig Runner, these are like the big name brands, and they are probably the most expensive out there that you can buy. There are some less expensive ones that I have used both, and I haven't seen a difference between them. So, what you can afford, I guess. All right, that is the end of my presentation on the slides. I'm going to just show you. I'm going to switch my camera to my document camera here, and I'll just show you a couple things, and then we'll see if there's any questions. It's not that easy to switch, so there we go. There, boom. Let's see if that works. There we go. All right. So, how am I going to do this? So on the connectors, actually, I'm going to have to get this closer so you guys can see it. There we go. There. Okay. So as you can see, this is a 15, and there is a 30. Very hard to see the two of those together when you're trying to fish those out of a bag. Which one's 15, and which one is 30. So, and they look exactly the same. Let's see. Now the 45s are way different. As you can see there, they have a different type of crimp on it. It takes a different part of the tool to crimp those. So that's the 45. But you can see how small they are. Very, very small. Now let's see if I raise this back up here. Some more light. There we go. The tool, the Anderson Powerpole tool, this is what it looks like. see right there. There's the different ends, and they're labeled, you know, 10, 15, or 15, 30, and 40, 45, I think it is. And it's a ratcheting tool that allows you to crimp them appropriately. This is the, let's see if I can get some more light on this. This is one of the strippers that I use, and it has this piece here that allows you to set the depth. So if I'm making a lot of these, I'll set this depth to 5/16, and then just go to town stripping wire. You saw this one already in my presentation. This has a bunch of my connectors already on it. This right here, that is a connector for my TNC. It's a very small wire, so this is a 15 amp connector on this small jumper wire. This is a one for a standard like a Kenwood radio or an ICOM mobile radio. It's just a jumper between the radio connector and an Anderson Powerpole connector. Then this one, I made it a little more fancy. I put the boot on it. So I remembered to put the boot on this one. And this is actually for a laptop that runs on 12 volts. So that's my laptop jumper. And then this is what I put in my go bag as a simple way to distribute power. I need to distribute power. There's another one that I've used, and I still have this, is it's basically just straight through on each end. There's 4 on this end and 4 on this end, and they're all connected together. So you can, you know, you have power coming into one of them, maybe from a power supply, and then the other 3 can go to radios or other ancillary equipment. There's another little piece you can get. This is a little plastic connector, and the idea with this, let me see if I can show you. So here's 2 ends of a wire. So Anderson power poles, and we're going to connect these together. And those pins, if you don't have the roll pins in it and you don't want this to come apart, you use this little black connector, and you connect the 2 together like that. So that makes sure that you can't pull them apart. So that's handy if you're running these down across somewhere that you might have someone tripping over something you don't want to pull apart. So, but if you put the roll pins in, this will not work. That's another where I found out, well, don't put roll pins in. Let's see. This is another device that I picked up as handy. This is PowerWorks makes the same device. It shows, you know, this is the source on this side, and the load is on this side. And what it does is it shows you the current, voltage, everything you need to know. I use this in conjunction with my Bio power battery. So it already has the Anderson power poles on them. So it's really handy to see where you're at with your voltage. It's really inexpensive. This particular one is really inexpensive. I got it off of Amazon. Let's see. Lastly, where is it? Here it is. So you can make up these kind of devices as well. I put a cigarette lighter plug on the end. I actually ran it through a coil to kind of, I don't know, hoping to eliminate some automobile noise, and then Anderson power pole on the end of that. So that's another idea of way to do this. Then the cable itself, it comes in rolls like this. Some people call it zip cord, but you can see that the red and the black are bonded together, and you have to kind of strip it apart and pull it apart, you know, like that. This works pretty well. This stuff, it looks like it is a number, what? Oh, this is 14 gauge. Oh, that's small. So There's my roll of zip cord. I usually have a few of those around. And then the other thing, if you don't have the Anderson Powerpole stuff, you can use something like this. This is called it's made by Thomas and Betts. This is one of my older tools I've ever used. It's a basic crimper. I used this for years before I bought the actual Anderson tool. And it worked fine, but this is where I really got into the issue of it flattening out that piece on the end. I've also used this tool, which is also Thomas and Betts. It's it's a stripper and crimper all in one. It has a little nipper on the end so you can cut cable. So I throw this in my box because it's my go-to. One tool will do it all. I don't need 3 tools. This would do it. You don't have to buy Thomas and Betts. You know they get these anywhere, any hardware store, that kind of thing, and they work fine. You just got to make sure that you get that crimp just right before you slide it in there. All
hey,
right.
Mark, Peter has a question in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead. That's a good point. I'm actually at that point. So
He says for small or low loads, can you combine multiple wires to one connector, or not recommended?
yes, absolutely you can. I've actually had to do that, especially in a pinch when you need to have that connection done. So yes, you can. It also helps make up it. So that's another good example. So if you had a 30 amp and all you have is 30 amp, and all you have is maybe a 24 or a 20 AWG cable, it might be better to run two different cables to get you that amperage. All right.
Bill Worthington has a hand raised. Go ahead, Bill.
Bill has a hand. I'm going to change my camera while you're doing that.
Okay. This is more of a comment than a question, but you know, I've been using these connectors for 15 plus years in my job with magnetic observatories, and the one thing we found that was very handy with these is that unless you were dealing with somebody who could ruin a steel ball with a rubber hammer, you could make power connectors or other connectors almost idiot proof. And there are other colors besides red and black. And
yeah.
So we'd sometimes make like a 4-conductor connector that you could only connect up one way. And these, it's like, why didn't they come up with these sooner? And they're great for running power lines and stuff like that. And some people I've seen will actually twist the power cables just to because they think they have to. But
well, good point. Yeah, I have some green ones and some yellow ones and some blue ones, and yeah, I've used them for other connectivity as well. They're very handy for that, especially if you don't want to mess up your connected. Make sure everything is connected properly. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, you can also, one thing you can also do is if you have one of those rig runners, you can sit there and attach a wire to the ground on there and then put green on it, and then you can hook it into your green ground wire if you feel like it. If you do have one of those ring runners, it really helps if you have a set of spare fuses.
Well, that should be your standard going forward. Everyone should have spare fuses. Anybody else have any questions?
We did put the link to the door prize drawing in the chat, so if you want to enter, we have 7 entries so far.
Super.
Well, Mark, thanks for coming up with that. It's very interesting. Yeah, they're the standard, I guess, of the ham industry, if you will. And again, I've used them too for years. One of those distribution boxes I've got in my car, they're